Hey everybody, today we're going to do the Trig 3 lesson, and we are going to introduce a new rule, and that new rule is going to help us answer all of the questions that you see in front of you and then some. And if you look at the questions in front of you, what you should notice about it, we have the same language that we normally have, solve the triangles, but what we don't have is a right triangle. We have been doing right triangles this entire time, and now we get into trying to figure out what to do if it's not a right triangle. Okay, so the rule that we are about to use is called the law of sines, and you know what? I'm actually just going to scroll down, and I'm going to show you the rule really quick. And I think it'll make a lot of sense once you get to about the third example or so. Okay, so law of sines. Not signs like a yard sign. It's the law of sines. Okay. All right, so what does it look like, and when can we use it? And why in the world do we have an equal sign and then another equal sign? Those are all great questions, and we're going to get to it. So it says solve the triangles. Okay, let's take the information that we have and see what we can do. Okay, so let's start with angle C up there, which is 98 degrees. All right, then we have angle A, which is 32 degrees. And then we have little a. Now, one thing I want you to notice about this, even when it's not a right triangle, we still use A, B, and C, and we still make sure that the angle and the sides are opposites. So that means if you have a capital A for an angle and then you go to the opposite side, that is where your lowercase a is going to be. Okay, so remember that because it is going to be a thing. All right, so we have 15 centimeters right there. So your job is going to be to figure out the other three pieces to the puzzle. So that means sides B and C, and then angle B. Okay. Now I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to be intimidating for a few problems, and then when it's all said and done, there's a good chance you're going to like the law of sines better than anything else we've done. Okay, so don't get too overwhelmed about anything. I just want to make sure we have confidence going in that this is actually going to be a pretty good lesson for a lot of people. All right, so let's talk about how it's done. We aren't actually going to use all three of these pieces in the formula. You know, when you see sine of A over A equals sine of B over B equals sine of C over C, we aren't going to use all three of those. But we do know that all three of those ratios are going to be equal to each other. So essentially, you're going to see kind of a similarity between what we did before and what we're doing here, where you're going to pick something that you know and then something that you don't know. And you're going to use what you know to solve for what you don't. So for instance, if you look at question number 1, is there a letter that we know everything there is to know about? You know, either A, B, or C. Is there a letter that you know everything about? And the answer is, well, yeah, I know everything about the letter A. I know that the angle is 32. And I also know that little a, the side across from it, is 15. All right, now, is there a letter that I know something about? You know, not the entire story, but something about. And the answer is, well, yeah, I know that angle C is 98. I just don't know what side C is. Okay. So I'm going to put a little c right there. And now, if you look, I've created a ratio that I can solve. So we're actually going to get rid of the fraction altogether, and we're just going to say c times the sine of 32 equals 15 times the sine of 98. So again, it looks intimidating, and you're going to figure out pretty quick that this is actually one of the easiest things we do in this chapter, because if I want to solve for c, all I have to do is divide both sides by the sine of 32. So my advice to you, and this will work for most people depending on most calculators, don't overcomplicate your life. If you want to solve for the letter c, you know, we're dividing both sides by the sine of 32. If you want to solve for c, do it all at the same time. Just type in on your calculator the entire thing. As always, every time we start a lesson, we want to make sure that our calculator is in degree mode. Sometimes if you change your batteries or if something else happens, it won't be. But just do the entire thing all at once. 15 times the sine of 98 divided by the sine of 32. Just do it all. Just get it over with. In this case, 28.03. I'm going to use a couple of decimals as we go through. Okay, I didn't draw my answer box big enough, but that's okay. I'm going to use a couple decimals as we go through because I want to make sure we're not making any silly mistakes. Okay. That was it. So we didn't have to pick between sine, cosine, and tangent. We're just using the law of sines. All right. Now, angle B is still going to be what's left from 180. Yes, it's not a right triangle, but the rule still applies. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to look and say 98 plus 32 is 130. And if we have 180 to spend and we've only spent 130 of it, it means we have 50 left. So there you go on that. And now we can actually take what we started with, the sine of 32 over 15, and we can apply it a second time using the new information, which in this case is now going to be the b part. So we're going to keep the sine of 32 over 15, but now we're going to say sine of 50 over little b. So you can use the law of sines twice in any given problem here. Now, there will be times where you only have to use it once, and there are going to be times where the law of sines doesn't work. So those of you who are like, well, why don't we just use it all the time? Well, there are times when you aren't going to want to, but we'll just talk about that when we get there. All right, so we've got, if we cross multiply here, and again, I know I'm not supposed to just cheat and cross multiply, but here we are. All right, b times the sine of 32 equals 15 times the sine of 50. And if you want to solve for b, then you're going to need to divide both sides by the sine of 32. I'm running out of room, so I'm going to just crunch it in there. And now we'll get the calculator out again, And this time we're going to do 15 times the sine of 50 divided by, I just did the thing that you're not allowed to do. Pay close attention here. I didn't actually do this on purpose, but I just want to show it to you. If you look, the calculator created a set of parentheses to type in the angle. If you don't close that set of parentheses before you hit the division symbol, it's going to screw you up. So again, I didn't mean to do that, but I'm glad I did, because that's going to be the most common mistake people get on their calculator, is they're going to forget to close that first set of parentheses before they type in the division symbol. Anyway, so that would give you 21.68 centimeters. And there you go. You have now solved the triangle. Now, there are a lot of things you can take out of that, a lot of conversations that we can have, but I'm going to save those until after we've done a few more problems. All right, so let's go down to number 2. This is a pretty similar problem to number 1 as far as the information they gave us, so hopefully we can get in a good groove here. All right, so through the magic of videos, I've thrown in our solving box. Let's lay out what we know and what we don't. So we've got a 32-degree angle here. Okay, we have an 85-degree angle here. And the little a is 9 inches. All right. So now our job is to figure out what we need to know. And that's going to be angle B, side B, and side C. All right, so once again, if you look at our setup, we have the complete story about the letter A. So that's something we're going to use right off the bat. We are going to say sine of 32 over 9 and then we're going to put it equal to the incomplete story. So what letter do we know some of the story of, but we don't know the whole thing? And so I told you the setup was going to be really similar here to the previous problem, and it is. So we are going to use angle C. So we're going to say sine of 32 over 9 equals sine of 85 over little c. All right, and when you cross multiply, we're going to get c times the sine of 32 equals 9 times the sine of 85. Now again, my advice to you is to just save the calculator for the very end and do it all in one shot. That way you don't have to keep going back and forth. And the other thing, and this is a big deal, is that you don't have to round. I don't want to have to round anything. I want to get my answers and then round at the very, very end. If you round in the middle of a problem, then you're going to find yourself making a lot bigger error with your final answer as far as the numbers are concerned. All right. So we're going to divide by the sine of 85, or we're going to take 9 times the sine of 85, and we're going to divide by the sine of 32. Notice that I closed off that first set of parentheses. And that gives us, if we round, 16.92 inches. All right, now, we're going to take that exact same setup that we had earlier, and we're going to use it again for B. Okay, so I'm going to bring that in, and I'm going to use the exact same setup a second time, but instead of using C, I'm going to use B. So let's take a quick look here. So we've got angle B, which is going to be basically just whatever is left over. 32 and 85 is 117. Take that away from 180 and you find out that you had 63 degrees left. So I'm going to put 63 right here, and then I'm going to use that to solve for little b. All right, so then when you cross multiply, you're going to get b times the sine of 32 equals 9 times the sine of 63. And same plan as last time, we're going to divide both sides by the sine of 32 to wrap up our problem. All right, so we're going to divide that side and that side by the sine of 32. All right, so let's go through, get our calculator out, and do it. So 9 times the sine of 63 divided by, I almost did it again, divided by the sine of 32. 15.13 inches. All right, so now it's time to bring up the conversation piece that I had talked about before. I hope you notice here, if the angle is small, then the opposite side is going to be small. And if the angle is big, the opposite side is going to be big. And that is a huge plus as far as error checking is concerned. If you find out that that does not hold true, then you did something wrong. So again, if you have a little angle, you're going to have a little side. So notice on number 1, the smallest angle was 32. The smallest side was right across from it. The biggest angle was 98. The biggest side was right across from it. Okay, that's a great way to check your work as you go. All right. Number 3, let's see. So we've got angle C, which is 115 degrees. And then we have side B, which is 6 yards. And then we have side C, which is 8 yards. Okay, now this, I hope you notice the setup is going to be a little bit different. Let's talk about why real quick. The reason why, here, let's zoom in on problem number 3 so that we can focus. The reason the setup is different for problem number 3 is because now we have been given one angle and 2 sides. Now, sometimes this is actually not a good thing at all. Sometimes this is actually a really bad thing. But in this case, it won't be. If you get into accelerated math or pre-calculus down the road, you're going to learn about cases where that wouldn't be a good thing. In this case, it is just fine. All right, so let's take the letter that we know everything about. That would be the letter C, and we're going to say sine of 115 over 8. And then we're going to choose the letter that we would like to know more about. So the letter that we know some things about, but not everything, and that would be the letter B. And we're going to say sine of B over 6. So right away, all right, so that's going to give you, if we cross multiply, 8 times the sine of B equals 6 times the sine of 115. Now this one is going to have one extra step toward the end, and hopefully you'll see why here in just a second. So we're going to divide both sides by 8. And then we are going to get the calculator out. We're going to figure that out. 6 times the sine of 115, close the parentheses, and do divided by 8. Okay, now that is weird. So if I divide both sides by 8, I get sine of B equals 0.6797. Okay, well that's not really an answer. That's not the angle we're looking for. How can we figure out the angle? Well, whenever the angle is the thing that you're trying to solve, remember this from the past, whenever the angle is the thing that you're trying to solve for, we use the inverse function. Now, I don't want to round. Rounding is annoying. Rounding causes mistakes. So I'm going to find the ANS button for answer. Just about every calculator has one. And then it's going to use the answer from the previous question to give me my number of degrees. 42.82 degrees. Okay. All right, now I tried to put a little more room in here, and I'm not sure it worked, but that's okay. We're going to do our best here. 42.82 degrees. All right, there you go. Good enough. We'll make it work. All right. So now we have the complete story of C and we have the complete story of B. We're going to need to figure out A. So now that we know that, why don't we do 180 minus 115 minus angle B? And that will give us the number of remaining degrees, which is 22.18. And that is my angle A. And so now, since I have kind of a partial story of angle A, I can do the law of sines one more time, and I can figure out my final side. So I'm going to keep what we did earlier with the sine of 115 over 8, and I'm going to put it equal to what I have kind of a partial story of, which is the letter A, and that will give me the sine of 22.18 over little a. All right, so we cross multiply and we get A times the sine of 115 equals 8 times the sine of 22.18. Now, I can just slide this up. We're going to divide both sides by the sine of 115. And we're just about done. We just have to do that last little piece on the calculator, and we should be good. So 8 times the sine of, do the answer trick again. I don't want to have any rounding issues, so do the answer trick again. Just leave that exact number in on the calculator. We rounded on our paper, but that doesn't mean you have to round with the calculator. And we get A equals 3.33. All right, 3.33 yards. There you go. All right. All right, so let's try that method one more time with example number 4. And then we will call it a day. All right, so once again, through the magic of video, I can just sneak that in there. Angle C is 68 degrees. And then side A is 5 miles. And side C is 7 miles. All right, there you go. We have to figure out everything else. So if we're talking about what letter we know the complete story of, that would be letter C. We know that the angle is 68 degrees, and we know that the side that goes with it is 7. If we're talking about the letter that we know something about but not everything, that would be the letter A. So sine of A over 5. All right, so we are going to cross multiply here, and we're going to say 7 times the sine of A equals 5 times the sine of 68. And then remember, this is the type of problem that has an extra step where we have to divide both sides by 7 and then do something else after that. So sine of A equals, so then you're going to get 5 times the sine of 68 divided by, there you go again, divided by 7. 0.6623. Don't worry if you don't copy it over right, because we're not actually going to use that version. We're going to leave it in the calculator. And then since we have to work backwards to figure out the missing angle, we aren't going to use the sine, we're going to use the inverse sine. And then we're going to hit the ANS button so that we don't actually have to retype in the number. We're going to get 41.47 degrees. All right, now. All right, so at this point we have the complete story about the letter C, and we have the complete story about the letter A. So we're going to do 180 minus 68 minus the number of degrees that we just used for the answer there, which would be 70.53 degrees. And now we can just figure out the last little bit of information here. We're going to use the same setup that we did for the first half of our problem, sine of 68 over 7. And then we're going to put it equal to the very last thing that we need to know, sine of 70.53 over little b. All right, so then when we finish this thing up, we're going to get b times the sine of 68 equals 7 times the sine of 70.53. So again, just a little cross multiplying to wrap it up. Divide both sides by the sine of 68. And we will have what we're looking for. Divide both sides by the sine of 68. We already have that 70.53 number in the calculator. So all we really have to do here is 7 times the sine of, and then you're just going to hit the answer button. Divided by the sine of 68. We get 7.12. Which makes perfect sense, by the way, because if you look, angle C was slightly smaller than angle B. Angle B is the biggest of the three by just a little bit. So it would make sense that side B would be just a teeny bit bigger as well. So it all fits together once you try to make sense of it. All right, so we have practiced the law of sines 4 times. Next time we meet up, we will keep going. We will keep practicing because I want to make sure you're feeling good about the rule. It's a really good rule once you get used to it. So keep practicing. Thanks a lot for watching. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your family. I'll see you next time.